Welcome to the Win, Make, Give Wealth Series. This is Ben Kinney, joined with Bob Stewart and Chad Himes.
Hello.
Excited to be here. Let's do this.
They don't sound excited.
We are excited, Ben.
We are rocking our way through the Wealth Series. This section is called the Buckets of Wealth.
I love this topic. Love it.
Now, I could write a book, gentlemen, on the lessons that I learned from 2008 to 2010. When this thing called the Great Recession of our generations, it almost bankrupted me. One of the most important lessons I learned is if you don't protect yourself from things that are outside of your control, then you aren't really wealthy.
Ooh.
And during that time, Chad, I wasn't. I had some assets, but only a couple kinds. The vast majority of my assets was wrapped up in real estate that didn't really cash flow.
Right.
In businesses that I kept saying, if I build it, they will come.
I've heard that somewhere.
My business happened to be in the real estate industry, which
Right.
Those of you that are familiar with 2008, 2010 was not a great time in history for real estate.
It was not.
When the housing bubble burst, all the available credit for refinancing, credit cards, lines of credit went away. And I was in the middle of a major remodel. I had been investing a lot of money into my business. And it basically screwed me. My credit score dropped. My lines of credit were froze. I started missing payments on my mortgage. I couldn't make payroll in my business. I knew as I emerged out of that chaos that from that point forward, I needed to be protecting myself and more diversified. I think about assets a lot like concrete. Bob, concrete has 5 ingredients: water, air, cement, sand, and gravel. Each is useful, all valuable on its own, but when they're combined, they offer massive strength and a ton of stability. The same thing happens in wealth building when you build your wealth around a variety of types of assets that we're going to call today, Chad, buckets.
Okay.
In fact, we've identified 5 buckets. We call them the 5 buckets of wealth. That is a system for you, listeners, and Bob, Chad, and myself to focus on, to diversify our assets and to be able to weather pandemics, recessions, real estate bubbles, dot-com crashes, and so on.
There's always something, isn't there?
Think of a bucket like literally a pail of water, Chad.
Yep.
And when it gets a hole, the water starts leaking.
Yes, it does.
If all of your buckets had a hole, you'd be scrambling and you would probably end up with nothing. If one of your buckets had a hole and your other ones were strong and sturdy, you could probably take the time to fix that other hole or to fill up your other buckets more with a little extra water. This is diversification.
Okay.
And when we talk about the buckets, these are the buckets that we want to focus on in this wealth series. Bucket 1, cash or cash equivalents. This is our reserves.
Okay.
When things get bad, cash is king. Bucket 2, stocks, bonds, retirement accounts, index funds, mutual funds, We call these financial instruments. This is your financial instrument bucket.
Okay.
Number 3, real estate. This is your real estate bucket where you own and invest in real estate. Number 4, businesses. Whether you start your own or invest in others, businesses are a great way to weather storms and to make a ton of wealth. And last, we're going to call this other bucket other.
Other. That's a very good name for it, Ben.
Social Security,
Okay.
collectibles, crypto, gold, precious metals, other things that have value. There are other assets that somebody in our audience, you might be an expert on that maybe we aren't, but it is going to be part of your wealth.
Okay.
These 5 buckets combine to being like a bar stool with 5 chairs. And Bob, if you were to sit on a bar stool with 5 chairs or
5
legs,
Yep.
how would it feel?
Sturdy.
Sturdy. Chad, if you were to sit on a bar stool with 1 leg, how would it feel?
Like a pogo stick.
Yeah, not good. It would take a lot of your muscles and time and energy to feel stable.
Yeah, and using that analogy, Ben, even if something happened to one of your buckets, as you talked about a little bit earlier, and that 5-legged stool only had 4 legs, that's probably pretty still solid to sit on. That's probably what most bar stools actually are.
One of the reasons
I think
that
all bar stools. No,
I don't know. I don't
Are
go to
there
the bar.
3-legged bar stools? Maybe there are.
one of the reasons why we created these 5 buckets
Mm-hmm.
and we've chose these specific 5
Right.
is because they're things that are accessible to all of us, and that we as a group have come up with a model and a system for these different buckets that we think all of you can leverage to build a ton of wealth.
Now, some of them might be a little farther out of reach. There are some listeners out there today who are not about to make a real estate investment yet. Although that doesn't mean they shouldn't have the bucket, as you're going to teach the lessons of how to fill the bucket so that the bucket will be in a position to get put to good use when the time comes.
Yep.
Okay. I just don't want our younger audience or people who are working through that net worth and still seeing a negative number working themselves back towards it to say, well, no, Ben, I can't just go buy a duplex tomorrow. I'm not financially in that position. Yet that doesn't mean they shouldn't have this bucket sitting there starting to collect water.
The bucket, the 5 buckets,
Yep.
is a strategy and a system for diversification. Let me explain. If we had an extra $1,000 after we paid all of our expenses,
Okay. So this is going back to the reality check and
Yep.
realizing I've got that delta, as you said.
monthly,
Yep.
and we wanted to have 5 even buckets, we would put 20% of that $1,000, Bob,
200. I got this. I got
200
Thank God for Bob.
into our reserve bucket
Yep.
every month.
Okay.
We would put $200 into our stock account
Yep.
or retirement
Our
account.
financial instrument bucket.
Yep, every month.
Okay.
We put $200 into our real estate down payment bucket.
Yep.
We put $200 into our investing in businesses or starting business or improving our business bucket.
Called our entrepreneur bucket.
I like that.
Okay.
It's actually a really good name for it. We
There
might
you
change it officially now.
Okay. It's officially been changed here. You heard it. And I
And
get
then-
copyright something in there.
And then the last bucket is tangible assets.
The other bucket, as you referred to.
Yeah,
Okay. Bob's
Now-
shoes, your posters, things like that.
gold,
Gold, right, as you mentioned.
whatever that might be.
Yep.
Okay. Now, each one of those buckets, as they get fuller with cash,
Yep.
you do things with it.
Ooh, I like this.
In the real estate bucket, as it gets more filled with cash,
Yep.
you use it as a down payment to buy your first house
Okay.
or to buy your first investment property.
Okay. Smart.
Okay. Your stock account, you might automatically deposit it in Acorns or in Fidelity or something else, and it buys stock on a monthly basis.
So what you're saying is that bucket, it might literally go into that bucket and that bucket immediately gets dumped into, whereas the other bucket is gathering water.
Correct.
Okay.
The cash reserve bucket just gets built up for emergencies.
Until we get to that 4-month number you talked about in a previous episode, and then what, we put like a cap on this bucket?
Yeah, and then it overflows into the other buckets.
Oh,
So
I
then,
like
so
this.
at that point, when we've gotten to our 4 months of reserve, now we're taking that $1,000 and we're putting $250 into each one of the 4 remaining buckets.
Yeah, or you might say, you know what? Buying a house is most important to me, so I'm going to put $400 a month into my real estate bucket.
And 200 into the other 3.
Yeah.
You can so that's our audience can decide once they've put the lid on a bucket where that other money spills into, whether it's all into one or divided up.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, Ben, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume over the years, like, because real estate is kind of, it's your industry, you know it very well, like you may have at certain times put a little bit more of the percentage into that bucket because you were, you know, setting up to make some investment there. You're really, really confident in the investments you make in that arena.
Yep.
So it doesn't have to be 2020, 2020, 2020. I could do 15 here if I want, or 25 in that reserve bucket because I want to get it filled a little quicker at first.
I tend to evenly divide it,
Okay.
and I might even set up my own savings accounts for those buckets.
Okay.
But then I'm willing to borrow from it over time if I need to. Meaning at the end of the year, I might have nothing in business to do. So I might borrow from that bucket to buy some real estate or to put more into the stock market.
Okay.
Make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. I just want our audience to get it who are sitting out there and saying, well, I'm going to do it my own way. Look, Ben's got this system and it works for a reason, folks. Let's just ask you those questions.
The 3 easy buckets, which the vast majority of people do, let's say the first one, is they save up cash.
Okay.
And they save up cash and they don't do anything with it because they're worried and scared.
Yes.
So they just save up more cash. And that cash isn't really working for them.
So what you're saying is that reserve bucket, basically, it's just overflowing and now it's just wasted water because it's just flowing out of a bucket that's already full.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I talked to a guy this morning that said, I've saved $1 million in cash and I have no money in retirement. And we got to have a conversation with this gentleman and show him that he's paying too much in taxes because he's not maxing his retirement.
Right.
And that money isn't growing. And if he would have grown it, it wouldn't have been $1 million today, Bob. Over the last couple of years, it would have been $2.5 million.
Right.
And when you explain the math, he gets sick to his stomach because he realized the opportunity cost of not being knowledgeable about wealth has cost him millions of dollars already.
Right.
It adds up, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So understand that these buckets have levels that they need to be put to use or capped as you're going.
Exactly.
Okay.
As we go through the rest of the wealth series, it'll be a little different than the previous wealth series released 2 years ago, because we're going to spend a little bit more time on a couple of the buckets that really stand out to me.
Such as?
Namely, financial instruments.
Yep.
And real estate investing.
Of course.
And we will touch with an episode on the other bucket, the entrepreneur bucket, newly named.
Yep.
And we've already really talked about cash reserves.
Correct.
And how to do that in the 4-month process.
Okay, so for those of you who've been following along the wealth series and you're saying we are at a point that you're like, hey, I kind of heard this before. I remember we talked about the rule of 72 and we talked about that 4% retirement thing. Understand that we're setting it up, 1, to remind you, 2, refresh you, 3, get you re-engaged, and also for the new people who haven't heard this kind of stuff. But as you're talking, Ben, we're going to move forward into some new information because you're going to dive into these buckets in a way we never did in Wealth Series version 1.
The goal of these buckets is to increase our net worth over time in such a way that it flips the triangle.
Yep.
And creates passive income.
Okay.
So that when we don't have any normal income, we can live and have a great retirement.
Because we've got that investment income and the passive income.
Exactly.
Okay.
So let's not dive super deep into these buckets.
We're not going to get fully wet. We're not going to the bottom of the pool.
Yeah, we're just gonna dip our toes in the bucket, which is weird if it's like drinking water or something.
Yeah, sure.
but we're just gonna talk a little bit about the buckets, and I want to talk about a couple that we're probably not going to go super deep into in our other episodes.
Okay.
So the first one I want to talk about is the reserve bucket.
Sure. And we talked about that a little bit in a past episode. Let's dive into that bucket a little bit, or dip our toe into a little more, Ben.
So everybody write this down or follow along in the workbook on this, which is available at winmakegive.com/wealth. Download the workbook, follow along, and write down this about bucket one, cash reserves and cash equivalents. That cash, number one, is the ultimate protection. Cash is king.
Cash is king,
so to speak. It can get you out of a lot of trouble. It's liquid. It's accessible. It's protected for the most part in banks because they have FDIC insurance on it. It's the ultimate protection. And a lot of investors get stuck when they put too much of their net worth into the stock market or into real estate or into their business, and they don't have enough cash to survive interesting situations like a pandemic, a market correction, a .com drop. Over time, they always correct, but you have to be able to survive the short-term situations. The number two interesting thing about cash is cash doesn't really grow. The amount of interest that you earn on savings and checking accounts is historically been pretty nominal.
Right.
With rates increasing now, it's at least getting up to being a little bit reasonable, 3.5%, 4%, maybe even over that if the Fed intends to increase rates again.
Sure.
But the number two issue with cash is it just doesn't grow.
Doesn't it actually almost shrink, as you talked about earlier, due to inflation, that the money ends up being worth less?
Yeah. The amount of interest you earn in your checking account is going to be offset by the inflation amount of 2%, 4%, 5%, 8%, whatever it is.
Right.
Another interesting item about cash is it's easy to calculate how long it will last. So if your business shut down today and you had $100,000 and you knew that it cost you $5,000 per month to live personally,
yep,
you would know how many months you would have to actually live.
20 in that example right there. Even
Exactly.
I got that math.
Number 4, excess cash, and this is a Ben rule, but should never be more than 20% of your net worth, so long as your other investments aren't extremely risky. You might have it more than your 20% if you have a bunch of things that don't create income, like real estate that you own, but it doesn't create any monthly income.
Right.
You might have extra cash.
Like you bought some land or you bought yourself that cabin that's sitting there and you don't let people use it.
Excess cash should never be more than 20% of your net worth.
Okay.
But understand, every year your net worth should increase.
Correct.
So also the amount of cash should also increase.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So if you're doing your net worth, as we know you should have already through the Wealth Series, you should be able to look at it now and say, hey, my net worth is this. Here's how much cash I have. What percentage is it? And if it's more than 20% of that net worth, it's time to put that cash to work.
And if it's too low, that's also a problem.
Okay. So then it's start getting more money into that cash right away, just in case.
Yeah.
Because you need to be liquid at times.
Number 5, excess cash, the phrase that I like to use, is all cash above and beyond the 4 months reserves that my business needs, the 4 months reserves that each rental property I own needs,
Yep.
and the 4 months reserves for my personal expenses would need.
Right.
That excess cash above that, or above the 20% that we just mentioned, should overflow into the other 4 buckets.
Got it.
That make sense?
To me, it makes complete sense, right? I envision these buckets, Ben, like the champagne tower at the big party that you're at, that they're pouring it into the top, and we got to make sure that reserve bucket gets filled. But once it's at Now it starts dripping out into all the other areas that are out there, making sure that we're filling the other buckets.
For you non-alcoholics, it could also be like a chocolate fountain.
Oh,
There you go. Except that just kind of flows and reflows.
I'm just going to dip my strawberries in the chocolate fountain. It's going to be good. Okay. Bucket 2, financial instruments. Just to be clear what I mean, financial instruments are things like stocks, bonds, and index funds.
Right.
The benefits of financial instruments, write these down, everybody. There's 3. Number 1, it's pretty passive.
Okay.
You don't have to work up every single day and show up to make sure your business opened and your employees showed up. You don't have to make sure the hot water tank is working at your rental property. It's really a passive investment.
Right.
Somebody else could manage it, for instance, or you put it in an index fund and you forget about it.
Right. My 401k money, I'm not paying any attention to. It just does its thing.
The second benefit of financial instruments is that there's tax benefits for you to put money in certain vehicles like IRAs, self-directed IRAs, 401ks, defined benefit plans. There's all these different vehicles that you can use that will allow you to keep more cash now if you put it in those retirement vehicles.
Now, Ben, you're going to dive into financial instruments as an episode, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so folks, Ben's just giving you the 3 benefits right now. We're jumping into this bucket in the future.
The third benefit is that it can be self-managed. Meaning,
So it can be passive and it can be self-managed. It's both.
you don't have to pay somebody to do it.
Okay.
You could read The Simple Path to Wealth or The Psychology of Money.
I think
Or
The Simple Path to Wealth, that was a great book.
it was awesome.
You gave me a copy of that one to read. Great book.
It basically tells you that investing in index funds, which we'll talk about in the episode,
Yep.
is about as effective as paying somebody to manage your wealth.
Right.
Now, when you do the second bucket and you put money into the vehicles we described,
Yep.
we already talked about you just have to understand the 4% rule and the rule of 72. If you don't know what we're talking about, go back to the retirement episode,
And the compound interest episode.
right?
Yep.
Focus on that, learn that, come back to this episode,
Okay.
and you'll have all the information you need to start thinking about how our financial instruments going to help you with your retirement.
Okay.
The third bucket,
Probably one of your favorite buckets.
absolutely,
And you'll definitely do another episode on this bucket. We're going to jump into this bucket.
is real estate.
Right.
Real estate has 3 major benefits. Number 1, it can create instant cash flow
Yes.
because we rent it out.
Right. So that money can immediately start generating income for you.
And that cash flow is passive income
Right.
for the most part. Number 2, it grows in value. And your tenants pay off your mortgage and you create equity even if the real estate market doesn't go up because your tenants are paying off your mortgage for you.
Right. The debt will be going down because someone else is paying that for you. Even if the property value doesn't change, you still get more equity out of it. And I think you've said this before. Have you ever driven past the house you owned at some point, or your parents have driven by and never said, "Oh, I wish I didn't still own that today"?
Just doesn't happen. Real estate goes up over time, right, Bob?
Yes.
Yeah. Every time they send me that stupid thing from Open Door telling me how much the last house I sold is worth today.
And the other benefit?
There's a third.
Yeah.
Real estate has the greatest tax benefits of any asset.
Okay.
And when we get into real estate, we will do a section on the tax benefits of real estate, and it'll blow you away. The different tax, I don't want to call them loopholes, but really they are massive tax shelters or benefits for you because the government wants us to invest in real estate, improve neighborhoods, improve downtowns, improve different areas.
Right. So they're
create
not
affordable
loopholes.
housing.
It's not a loophole. It's the government literally giving you a way to not pay taxes on things, which you'll be covering in an episode for us as well.
Yeah. We're going to teach you the amount of money that you could make if
Okay.
you bought 5 or 10 homes with a very small amount down.
Okay.
The next bucket, bucket 4,
The entrepreneurial bucket.
the entrepreneurial bucket,
Yes.
is there's a few major benefits of owning a business or investing in the business. One of them is the returns you can get. You rarely can buy a piece of real estate and double, triple, quadruple, or 10x the rents.
Mhm.
Doesn't really happen.
Right.
But you have seen businesses that grow by 5x, 10x, and 100x.
Absolutely.
True? It has some of the highest capacity for massive returns.
Yep.
Also, businesses, as a downside, can go down to zero because they could be worth nothing if the business shuts down, right?
Correct.
You could have the house burned down on real estate and the land would still be worth something.
Correct.
Business doesn't have that. But one of the biggest benefits of business is the fact that it has unlimited returns.
Quickly, it could have unlimited returns.
Yeah.
Okay.
The second benefit of owning or investing in a business, even as small as a MLM, a multi-level marketing, or having your real estate license, it allows you to write off a lot of normal expenses that you would have to have whether you were in business or not.
Correct.
Cars, cell phones, meals, clothing, all legitimate expenses when you use it for your business, even part of your home as a personal office.
Yep.
And that's massive. And we'll talk about some of that in the tax section of the Wealth series.
I've never been so excited to actually talk about tax stuff as I'm going to be for that episode.
Yeah. When you think about having this business,
Yep.
the third reason or the third benefit of a business is it could also be passive if you invest in other people's businesses
Okay.
or if you hire somebody else to run it.
Yeah.
You don't have to show up if you can find somebody good to run that business for you, and that business can continue to pay you in perpetuity.
Sure. How many businesses do we all know? Everybody could probably name 3 to 5 businesses they know that the owner isn't actually the one they're running it any longer. The business is running at a high level without them.
Exactly.
Okay. So there's benefits to these buckets.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bucket 5,
The other bucket.
the other bucket, Social Security. We talked a little bit about that in the retirement one.
Sure did.
We could loan money out and become the bank. We'll talk a little bit about that later.
Okay.
There's a great book out there called The Banker's Code where we could loan money at a desired rate. Pretty fascinating. We could own other assets. Precious metals, gold, gems, collectibles, even domain names have value over time. We could create products, books, patents. These are all things that create value in their tangible assets, collectibles, etc., that protect you or you could sell off if you really needed to.
So that Beanie Baby collection might come in handy.
Indeed. Indeed, Chad. I'd love to know which one is your favorite.
I can't remember their names anymore.
Remember, in order to increase our net worth, we must spend less than we earn. With any excess left over monthly, we must pay off liabilities and reinvest the rest into the 5 buckets we just mentioned.
Yep.
We stop making those investments when those investments create the annual income we need for our desired lifestyle. All of the Wealth series is about working when we want, on what we want, with who we want, or to not work at all.
Sure.
Having, in our words, financial freedom.
Yes.
I hope this introduction into the 5 buckets of wealth gets all of you thinking about the different things that you've never thought about. And maybe you go read a book or listen to a podcast or start Googling and researching some of the things that we mentioned. But get ready for the rest of the Wealth series because we're going to dive in even deeper.
I love it. Okay, folks, we're dipping your toe in the buckets right now. We're going to jump in to the buckets and submerge ourselves. Make sure that you are understanding the concept. If you need to listen to it again to understand Ben's buckets of wealth so that we can get you where you need to go. Bob, if you were to look at your buckets, which one's the fullest? Which one's overflowing? Which one's got a hole in it possibly?
I mean, my business bucket's empty, or we call it an entrepreneur bucket now.
Yeah.
It's essentially empty, although That's actually not true. We have some stock in some businesses that's not public, so I'd be actually fascinated to talk to Ben about how he might consider that. But my cash, we have excess cash. Like we're sitting on more than 20% of our net worth in cash, and so that's it's overflowing essentially. Real estate is a bucket that's probably where that cash is going to end up going. We've been on the hunt for something in that regard. So I don't know. I mean, we're pretty spread out here.
Doing a good job with the buckets of wealth over in Bob World.
But that's different than, let's say, 3 years ago.
Absolutely.
Right? Like it was nothing like this. And the first wealth series really got us thinking about how to start spreading this out. I mean, back then it would have been really heavy in cash. We were just sitting on it.
Correct. And part of the reason we actually made the move, we had originally bought it as an investment property and then just sat down and looked at some numbers and said, hey, wait a minute, made some changes. Okay. So we're replenishing some buckets for the next attack. Folks, we want you to understand these buckets. As we've said, we've talked about some of them. We're going to dive in deeper to some of these. Get yourself up to speed on the buckets of wealth and make sure you don't miss upcoming episodes of the Wealth Series 2.0. Until the next one, as always, do good.